Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to Fight Talk 2021. I think we're on episode 16 now. I am joined by our co-host, Mr. Rob Modesto. Rob, how you doing?
Greetings, sir. I'm doing very, very well. It's a beautiful day in Tampa, Florida. How are you?
Oh, tremendous. I'm sitting inside, so honestly I don't really know how nice it is outside, but I'm going to guess that it's very hot.
It's about 400 degrees.
Yeah, Celsius.
Mm-hmm.
So we had an interim title fight over the weekend. This is what I want to do. I want to talk a little bit about the card. I want to talk about interim titles in general. And then I want to get into the specifics about this weekend and the fight, the main event itself. So starting off with the card, main event, really, we had a couple, good performances on there. I would say one of the things that stuck out to me that I want to talk about right away was that Bobby Green decision that I texted you about. What'd you think about that?
I think we both agree that I think that Bobby Green lost. I don't think that it should have been 30-27 on that one card. That judge is blind.
Yeah.
I think you had joked that it was Adelaide Bird who was actually the judge for that, which is highly likely that it was her. It was horrible. But other than that, there wasn't a ton of crazy judging scorecards that I thought other than that one card on that one fight. Did you recognize any other ones during the card?
Not really. I will admit I wasn't 100% like dialed in, tuned in, and then like listening to them and whatnot. I was just kind of peeking over, seeing some good scraps and whatnot. But for the main event, or not main event, but main card, I really was watching most of it. I took a nice little nap in there. But
At the Keisha Torres fight by chance?
Oh, how could you guess? No, I mean, she did a good job and whatnot,
Let's be honest, all of her fights up to this one have all been sleepers. She's never won in anything other than a decision, if I remember correctly.
I believe so, yeah. I saw her in Tampa back in 2016 lose to the current champ, Rose. And that's where I was like, all right, Thug Rose is the truth,
I stand corrected. She won by TKO for a doctor stoppage back in December. But that was she won in a submission too back in 2017. Okay. My bad.
I was about to say though, doctor stoppage. It doesn't count. Doctor stoppage.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, we're all in agreement to that one.
Right. Yeah. Well, you and you only, I think.
Yeah, me and the McGregor clan.
Right.
All the Irishmen, the whole country of Ireland. But other than that, we had some other breakthrough performances. I mean, I don't want to really call it breakthrough, but Aldo looked good. I didn't think it was anything like too crazy. He definitely put his foot on the gas in spurts. I like that his leg kick was there and whatnot, but it's one of those things with Aldo where I'm like, okay, you're like almost, I guess, not killing himself anymore. I guess he's gotten used to going down to 35, but I heard that he's eating like 2 pounds of salad every single day. So it's like, why are you making all these sacrifices when you fought for the title? That's still pretty fresh in our minds.
Yeah, I like him at 135. I think that he looks good at 135. He looks terrible weighing in at 135.
Oh, yeah.
But you know what? He opened up that burger joint back a few years ago or a decade ago, however long it was, and he got chubby in between fights, and then he couldn't make his 145. I don't know why he can't just maybe only eat the burger like once a week and cut to 145. But I think that 135 is a good weight class for him. He looks good. I mean, it's kind of hard to knock him on it.
Yeah, right. It's just one of those things where 135 is so deep. Like, I was looking at the top 10 the other day, and there's 6 former champions in the top 10.
Yeah. Well, one of them is Cody Garbrandt, and yeah. Should he be in the top 10 right now?
I mean, I don't know. I guess he had that knockout, so.
Okay.
Right. But other than that, speaking of top 10, top 5, all that good stuff, Vicente Luque.
Stud.
Bro.
Stud. Chiesa had him in real trouble at one point, too. I think I want to say in the post-fight, he said that Chiesa's choke was like 70% in, which
He
when
was
you're getting
cranking on that chin, cranking on that neck, man. I seen, a lot of people tap to that.
when you're getting to 70%, you're getting in for you're on Queer Street is where you are, Ray.
Yeah.
That's where you are. I mean, you're in trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. And for him to even like go to that choke afterwards, people were saying like, "Oh, he's crazy for even trying that." And I think maybe Chiesa like didn't even see that one coming.
Yeah, I mean, he just made a mental error, and you could see him trying to roll out of it. And it was like the way that Luque was positioned on his own shoulder. He just could like Chiesa couldn't roll backwards to like take pressure off, and it was a beautiful choke. And normally you don't see Chiesa get put into chokes like that, but high level, very high level. And you got to think the guys that he's training with every single day. I mean, when you have Gilbert Burns and you're rolling with him every single day, a 70% choke is not going to make you tap.
Yeah,
that dude is putting you in 99% chokes all the time. So he knows when he's in danger and when he's not. And of course, it looked to us like he was in more danger than he actually was, I'm sure. But he's a stud, man. He's a stud. Now we'll see if he hops ahead of Leon Edwards, that poor guy.
I know, right? I saw a lot of back and forth between him and Gilbert and all this stuff. And yeah, we'll see what happens with that whole division. But I think Luque is definitely a name that's added into the hat.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I think that division's tough, man.
Yeah.
You look at those
definitely.
guys that are in there. That's
honestly, bro, I'm kind of glad that and I don't want to like be a hater against Chiesa, but I just wasn't really a fan of him. So for him like breaking into that like title picture and whatnot, and then even Marty Fake Newsman bringing his name up, saying like, "Oh, I want to defend against him, like a voluntary defense against him." It was just one of those things where I was like, that doesn't excite me in like the least bit.
I like Chiesa, the personality. I think he's a cool dude. Fighting, I mean, I just don't see him fight that often to where I can really get like, it seems like he fights like once a year.
Yeah.
And it's hard for me to get behind that when, if that's the case. I wouldn't have minded if he won and, eventually got a title shot. I still think that he'd be a win away from getting a title shot if he did win this fight. And I think that Luque is a win away. I think Luque against it's not going to be against Masvidal, but Luque against, I guess, Leon Edwards, is I'll take that. That's a good fight.
Yeah, that would be sick. That would be a good one, especially if they're going to put Edwards on the burner, which looks like it's going to happen.
Yeah.
But all right, moving on to I guess the main event. But before we get into that, man, I want to talk about interim titles just in general. Let me just hear kind of a little bit of your thoughts on just the subject of interim titles. How do you even feel about interim titles?
I feel mostly good about interim titles, except in situations like this where, Francis. I mean, when did he win the title? What month was that against
last week?
It was basically might as well have been
last weekend. Right? Yeah, it was like March 30th, bro.
Like we don't need to call this an interim title just because you guys can't. You wanted to put it on pay-per-view and title fights sell more pay-per-views. Like you don't have to call it an interim title. Like people are going to watch that fight. If they care about the sport, they're going to watch one way or the other. And the people who don't care about the sport aren't going to watch the fight anyway. Like,
yeah,
saying that it's an interim title, people who are casuals probably don't even know what that means anyway. Right.
Yeah.
So I don't understand the purpose for it in that case. I see a purpose for it in, it's a little bit different with Amanda Nunes because she got COVID and all that, but say she got injured in this camp, right? And Juliana Pena is sitting there waiting to fight. I can see a fight of Juliana Pena and somebody else happening in, let's call it November, and that being an interim. If Amanda can't fight until
February. If you can't reschedule it within a reasonable amount of time.
Exactly. Yeah. Cause she hasn't fought in forever, I feel like there has to be a standard for when they're calling an interim title and they're just not they're not abiding by that standard. And that's where it gets into this realm of like, okay, because obviously the interim title came from boxing. A lot of the like format of UFC, MMA, it's pretty much blueprinted from boxing. You would agree? Yes.
Yeah. And even a lot of the stuff,
the 10-point must system.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff is from boxing, and I mean, a lot of the times they even use the same commissions. I mean, for the longest time, I'm pretty sure Florida was just the Florida Boxing Commission,
The
and
same
now,
the same judges.
yeah, the same judges that don't even know about jujitsu or like any
No.
sort of positioning.
Yeah.
So they're like on their phones tweeting
Yeah.
the whole time. So that being said, we look into, okay, what's the history of interim titles? Where is this standard that you're talking about? Like, where is this? Because we kind of have to look at case studies, right? So we look at, all right, what was the first interim title? And that one kind of made sense. And, when I look into like, why is there even interim titles? There's a few reasons that they say. And it's either the champion's injured, there's a contract dispute, or something where like they just refuse to fight a contender, right? And that's what happened in the case of the first interim champion with Randy Couture, with Tito Ortiz. He didn't want to fight Chuck Liddell, so Randy Couture went down from heavyweight. He fought Chuck. He won the interim title, and then later ended up winning the undisputed title, right? But then we see all of these different weird cases of interim titles, and before I get into those, I saw this interesting stat that said for like the first like 10 years that interim titles were even a thing, there was only 5 interim champions. Since then, there's been 15.
And when was that? When does that start? When does
2003.
2003? Okay.
So 2003 to like 2013, and then from 2013 to now, there's been 15.
Oh, wow.
I guess 16 now, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
But I mean, that just shows you right there where I feel like it's getting into this weird, like slippery slope of, because when you look at boxing and what they've done with interim titles, they've completely there's so many titles. I mean, already there's 4 major titles in each division. And then from there, it's like, if you look at WBA, they got a title for every single thing. They have a super champ, a regular champ, and then an interim champ. WBC will have their WBC champ fight on a Sunday or a Saturday, and the very next week have the WBC interim title being fought for. So it goes, I mean, this is making zero sense whatsoever. And now this is the trajectory that I'm seeing for the UFC. Not so much in a sense, but does it feel that way a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, look at the case of Tony Ferguson, his interim. Like,
I mean, yeah. I mean, you had Tony Ferguson, who had an interim title, and then you had a champion and an interim champion, Conor McGregor, and then Tony Ferguson. And then when he tripped on that wire, they stripped both of them in the same night and then gave it to 2 guys fighting for the vacant lightweight. And then you have other instances like Colby Covington was the worst one, where he won the interim title, but then Tyron Woodley said, "Hey, I'm good to fight in 3 months." Colby said, "I can't fight in 3 months. I have to get surgery on my nose." So they just straight up stripped his interim title and then had Darren Till fight for it. And then even then, Colby still didn't get the next title shot. It was Usman that got the next title shot.
yeah, it's it turns into a circus. It really does.
Yeah, that's what I'm kind of getting at. And then, and like you said, there's really no standard for it. I understand when somebody's hurt, but then also it takes away. I feel like it takes away from the legitimacy of what the interim title really means. Like when Justin Gaethje won it, he threw it on the ground.
That's a good point.
Yeah, because
he knew, he was like, "This isn't the real thing. I don't want the real. I want the real thing. I don't want to touch this." I remember during the face-off, during the week of him and Khabib, they tried to hand him the interim. He's like, "No, I don't want that. I want the real thing."
Yeah, exactly. He didn't even like call himself really the interim champion, because I mean that one made a little bit more sense because okay, Khabib was supposed to fight. They had, the fight fell through. It wasn't necessarily Khabib's fault. It was because of, the restrictions and all this craziness with COVID. But at least it made a little bit of sense, right? But the one they did before that for the interim lightweight really made no sense with Dustin Poirier and Max Holloway.
Yeah, that was.
I mean, dude, we're talking about Khabib. I guess Khabib was suspended. He had just fought in October. Yep. And that fight was in April. So October, November, December, January, March, April, 5 months. And you have an interim title. And I guess Khabib wasn't going to fight again until the next following. Well, he ended up fighting in September.
Until September,
but still, that's only 11 months.
Yeah. Didn't isn't the reason why he fought in September because they reduced the punishment on some of Khabib's team or something like that, and
Yeah.
Khabib was threatening to not fight until their punishments
Like Islam and all these guys.
yeah. And didn't they get a 2-year punishment?
It was something crazy. Yeah, they were trying to ban them. I think they were trying to ban Islam for like forever.
So
and then
in that case, if you're hearing that Khabib's not going to fight until these guys are off of suspension, I don't mind the idea of interim because Khabib, I mean, we know he's a man of his word.
Yeah,
you know?
right.
Like if he's the division does have to move on in that case. Luckily, they were able to reduce those suspensions and whatever happened in that case. But for that purpose, I think that the interim title makes sense. If you have a guy threatening not to fight for possibly another year and change, you have to move on to the next thing, you know?
Yeah, I agree with it, but I think you could still wait a little bit. You know what I mean? You could let that play out a bit and then have the interim title fight in, August or, June or, a little, give it a little more time. 5 months is a little bit quick on the trigger. On the same night, they had a double interim title fight with Gastelum and Stylebender, and that one actually made sense.
Yeah, that was when Whitaker was real injured, right?
Yeah, he was injured, and that's another weird thing when we're talking about these interim titles. We had Whitaker, who was the interim champion under Michael Bisping, who got injured and couldn't fight Michael Bisping, and then they made the fight with GSP. GSP wins the belt, but they never stripped Whitaker. And then when GSP vacated it, Whitaker who was injured, got elevated to champion. So this is, just way more examples of how this is being, I don't know if you would call it mismanaged or just oddly managed than structured and secure. Would you say?
I agree, and I don't understand what's wrong with fighting to be the number one contender. Like, why can't we just call these fights the fight for the number one contender? Why does it have to be an interim champion? Like, whoever wins this fight, they'll get the champion next.
Yeah, and then this is one of those things too where, once you put that interim title on there, there's no you have to strip the guy or else you have to make the fight. And once you give him the number one contender, then there's still a little bit of flexibility where you could be like, oh, well, this guy actually had a way crazier performance. Let's give it to him instead.
Well, here's the problem: is that I think that the interim title is already compromised. The validity of it, like people who watch the sport, like you and I, like what does interim title mean to you and I? It doesn't really mean anything.
Nothing.
Like it basically, you might as well just call yourself number one contender because that's what it is. Because look, if Cyril Gane starts camp for the fight against Francis and gets injured, they're just going to take the belt away from him. Like that doesn't happen to a champion. A real champion doesn't get his belt taken away because he gets injured in camp.
Yeah, no. The best example of it was Renan Barão. This guy became interim champion when Dominic Cruz was injured, and he defended his interim title twice. You're defending an interim title and you're not the champion, and they're like not pulling the belt from the reigning champion. Yeah. So, there's just examples all over the place. I guess the only good thing it does for the fighter is that in the event that the main champion is stripped or vacates, then you're automatically elevated. In the case of Robert Whitaker, in the case of Jose Aldo after UFC 200. And that's another example of we're talking about 6 months after Jose Aldo got sparked in 19 seconds and he's fighting for an interim.
Yeah. It's, devil's advocate. They may get some sort of pay bump as interim champion as well. So,
they do, yeah. They get championship money or what?
Yeah, they get or whether they start getting more points on the pay-per-view. I don't know. Obviously, we don't know how that scale works, but I'm all for the fighters getting paid more money.
I'm not.
You're not? No.
No. Yeah. If you're going to compromise the whole, like you said, the validity of the interim title, just pay him more money.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Just pay him what you would if it was, maybe number one contender money or something like that. But we don't need this interim title. Now, there are I don't want to just take the interim title and throw it down the drain, right? because I think there are instances where it's legitimate, and I feel like it should be legitimate because when you have these unification fights, right, to see, okay, who's the undisputed champ. The undisputed, that's a term that comes from boxing when you unify all of the titles in boxing. In UFC, there's only one main title, and then when you do an interim, there's two. So that would suggest or imply that there is a dispute on who is champion, right?
Okay.
Then, if you have the interim title, you have the main title. They're fighting for the undisputed status. It just gives it a like implication that there's, like I said, the dispute, and that there's some sort of a or they also call it a unification, right? They say, hey, you're unifying these titles. That would imply that if there's an interim champion under you as the champion, then that title that you have has now been in some way dissolved, in a sense, into or broken up in a way, and now there is that dispute. So my point is when an interim title, they have claim to the title, when they defeat the champion, shouldn't that be counted as a defense?
Yeah, I mean, it also minimizes the value of the real champion's belt. Because if you're talking about unification, then you're talking about 50-50. We're both champions.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that's the case. I think to be the champion, you have to beat the champion. You can't just call yourself a champion and not have beaten the guy who has the belt. You know, and you can't say that you have 50% of the belt because you haven't beat the champion.
Yeah, well then what does that mean then? Because it's obviously not 50-50, so was it 60-40? Is it 65-35? And then we get into this weird, like, who cares even about that?
Yeah.
But I get what you're saying. But then if that champion is stripped or vacates, then you are the champion.
Which comes out of luck if the real champion gets stripped. Or I mean, look at Jon Jones for, as an instance. He gets stripped of a belt every 3 weeks.
Yeah.
All you got to do is to be the interim champ in 205, and you're going to eventually become champion one day if he's on top.
Yeah. Jon Jones, fun fact, the only fighter to ever be stripped of both an undisputed and an interim title.
Good.
Yeah. Of course, right? Big surprise.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think my whole point with this is just like, if you're going to give an interim title out, it needs to mean something. And I feel like, for example, in the case of Robert Whittaker versus Adesanya, I think Adesanya had just as much claim to the title as Robert Whittaker, because really Whittaker was an interim champion that got bumped up to undisputed. He fought Yoel in a rematch, which was a great fight, not doubting that. But when the UFC says, okay, you haven't fought for almost a year, this is the date that our championship is going to be fought for, and then you have to pull out for your injury, and that interim title is introduced appropriately, then that person has, I would say, just as much claim, if not maybe even more, in a weird situation. They have that claim to the title than the actual, main champion. Am I going crazy on this one or no?
You're not, but
it's just all like weird.
It's just a gray area. There's no black and white. Ever since once you do it one time, the gray area expands, right? And that one time happened a long time ago.
Yeah.
Where, we have no control over that now. It's almost like the only solution is to get rid of interim titles completely and to start over, have a standard for what you have to do to get an interim title, what has to happen for you to get an interim title, whatever. And then the future of you as a fighter once you have the interim title, right? Mm-hmm. Like you're going to be guaranteed you're going to be guaranteed the next fight with the champion. But when you say that, right, again, you're the interim champion. You're in a camp getting ready for the champion. You have to pull out for some reason. Then they have somebody else fill in because the champion still wants to fight. What happens to that belt? It's like, it's a can of worms. That
in the case of Colby, you get stripped. In the case of Robert Whittaker, you don't, because they have to sit there and go, okay, well, we're the puppeteers, we're the puppet masters over here. We know that if GSP wins, he's just going to vacate, so we're going to have this as an insurance, so we don't have a vacant title. Like, I mean, that's really what it comes down to. It comes down to marketing. It comes down to, I guess, control over the organization, which, I mean, I can't really knock them for that, but it's just at the end of the day, it's turning it more into the politics of boxing to the point where we're even having this conversation. And that's something that is a stain on boxing. And that really I don't like to see in the UFC, because the UFC's model is supposed to be a model that's better.
The best fighters fight the best fighters. That's what
Yeah.
happens.
So then when we have all this weird interim title nonsense, I think what you're saying about like, okay, we just get rid of it completely. I think what they don't have to get rid of it completely, they just have to set that standard. They have to have a press conference or something and say, hey, listen, from now on moving forward with these interim titles, here are the rules. Like, if you don't defend your title, or at least, schedule a fight for your title within like that 12-month span, and obviously there can be some sort of exceptions, like Volkanovski, it's going to be 13 months, maybe 14 months since he last fought, but he had COVID, whatnot. So there's going to be some exceptions, but for the most part, I think 12 months is fair.
Yeah. What's an organization that may actually be able to negotiate this as a union? Fighter union.
Nah,
No?
don't care. Don't care about the fighters. No, I think the fighters need to look out for themselves financially. From what I understand, aren't they 1099 or no?
They're 1090. I'm assuming they're 1099. Yeah, they're not employees of the UFC.
Yeah, there's
but they also, that's not the only purpose of a union. It's not just for that. It's also for healthcare and for retirement benefits, all that stuff. I think
yeah, they got to figure that out. They got to figure that out on their own.
See, like the girl, I don't think it was this card. I think it was the card.
Yeah, Cheyenne Bays. Yeah, she was crying.
She had a negative bank account balance. What other professional athlete
has a negative bank account?
Let's be honest, okay? They always talk about, I want to say the big five sports, right? NFL, MLB, NBA, soccer, and hockey, right? If there's going to be a sixth, it's the UFC.
UFC's up there. Yeah.
So let me rephrase it. The five big leagues, right?
Yeah.
The sixth would be the UFC, right? What other athlete in any of those sports has a negative bank account balance? Like, come on. Like who else is struggling like that, where they have to take out a loan to go to Vegas to fight because they can't afford housing or whatever reason she said she had to take out a loan to get to Vegas to fight. Like, you hate to see it, and especially in a sport where they're sacrificing their body so much. I think that idea just blows my mind.
Yeah. So I understand it. I guess empathize with it, minimally. But what I also see Dana White's point of view, where he goes, yeah, well, we gave her this opportunity. She's 1-1 in the UFC. We gave her an opportunity. She's made 80 G's in 6 months. Where else is she going to do that?
Right. I understand, of course.
Yeah. So,
but she's made 80 G's in 6 months because she won a fight of the night or whatever it was. Like, that wasn't a guarantee. There was no guarantee that it could have been 30 G's in the last 6 months, which, you could get by on probably.
Some people make that in the whole 12 months, Yeah. So if she doubles that, then, that's a $60,000. Of course it gets split up with taxes and camps and all that kind of stuff too. But it's like, I think more than a fighters union, we need to be like, these fighters need to be teaching themselves like, okay, how do I set myself up for the future, and not just like Mike Tyson, all my money. But I feel like that's maybe more of like a deeper in-depth conversation. We might have to save that for another episode, because we'll go like super deep into that.
Well, this is the last thing we'll talk about with this, but when it comes to revenue share in the UFC, their fighter versus revenue, the fighter pay versus revenue difference is so outlandish. Like, I want to say it's
like 18%, I think, right?
It's like I think it's even less than that. I think it's like 8%. Like 7 to 8%, whereas in the NBA it's like 30%, NFL's in the mid 20s, something like that. And when you're bringing in numbers like the UFC is, like, there's, a billion people aren't going to watch the UFC like they do the Super Bowl every single year, right? and there's probably 100 million people that watch the NFL every single Sunday. You're never going to get that in the UFC, right? The most is pay-per-view buys is what, 3, something like that, 3 and change.
What, 3 million?
Yeah, 3 million.
Yeah, I think the highest UFC was 2.4.
2.4. Okay. Oh, I was thinking of was it Floyd versus Conor that was like 3?
Floyd versus Conor was like 4, something like that. But see, that's like right on level with like Mayweather Pacquiao, which is just insane. And even Floyd versus Conor versus Khabib, the 2.4, that was still even crazy too, because before the Pacquiao Mayweather fight, the highest ever was 2.4 with Oscar and Floyd.
And they probably made $100 million each.
Yeah, so I think what happens is I mean, there's a lot of things that I think go into the background, because like UFC, they have to like, I mean, who knows? From what I understand, they have to fight like they're doing stuff like trying to expand around the globe, like still like there's still this forefront of, because UFC is once upon a time it wasn't established, right? They were fighting like John McCain to even make sure like this could be a sport, and now they're doing that across the world. Like they've done it in America. It's been so well established in America that we're just like, yeah, this is normal. But over in France, you know, they're still fighting with all that kind of stuff. So who knows what type of legal fees, lawyers, all that kind of stuff. They're still like investing into the sport in a way.
They just legalized it in France.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you got to think, okay, how much money did it cost for them to do that? So in a way, it's still a young sport, but I don't know if that justifies them paying such a small percentage on.
It's not sustainable for the fighters, man. These fighters are gonna some smart fighter is going. Dominic Cruz is going to create his own league, and you know what's going to happen with it. Who knows? You know, whatever.
Yeah, but see, that's the thing. Like right now, UFC has just such a strong market share that I think the only person that could even do it is Conor McGregor. But then who is he going to fight? Nobody even worth us watching. Yeah. You know what I mean? So you can't really do that whole thing. Like you can do it in boxing because you can create your own promotion company. You fight on the same show, the same platform, Showtime, whatnot. But in the UFC, they make sure like if you get to a level that you're even able to do that, like a champion status, they're locking you in for a renegotiated contract with a sweet deal, because now you're making that champ money, so you're not really complaining that much. But they're locking you in for like 6-8 fights, so you can't even try to renegotiate that contract or get out of the contract or even buy yourself out of it, like Floyd Mayweather did with Top Rank.
You're making that champ money, but relatively speaking, that champ money,
it's not as much.
Nothing. It's nothing.
Yeah.
You have no context when you're making that money. Like you think that I'm sure Kamaru Usman is very happy with the amount of money he's making, and you know what? We don't know how much they're making off of the pay-per-view buys either. Let's call it, you know, for a big event where where it's 1 million pay-per-views. Let's say you're making, $1 million off of 1 million pay-per-view buys, right? You get $1 per pay-per-view.
Yeah.
You know, for some of these guys who are in other sports, I mean, if you're fighting 3 times a year, obviously that's fine. That's good money, you know, plus the salary that you're making and bonuses if you get bonuses and all that. But compared to other world-class athletes, you know, if you're the best in your division, let's call it you're the best on your team in the NFL. Let's call those equal. Guys, the best on the team are making $25 million a year, $30 million a year. You know?
Yeah, craziness.
Making $40 million a year.
Yeah, nuts.
You know, and they just aren't seeing that money in the UFC because Dana White is similar to the bad guy in the original Space Jam movie. That's the exact person that he is.
I would say so.
You know what? Kind of like Dana White. I have a soft spot for him. So
I like him too. You know what I mean? Because he just does what he does. He makes the fights happen, and then at the end of the day, he really controls it. I mean, he's like the kingpin.
I respect that he does not give a shit what anybody thinks.
He doesn't care at all, dude.
I totally. I give him 100% props for
even
that.
For this fight this weekend. Everyone was like, oh, you know, trying to criticize him, like doing the low key shade with their questions, and he was like, oh, you can go F yourself, like, if you don't like this fight.
Yeah.
And that was pretty much what he said.
He always goes, it's my company.
Yeah, I'll do what I want. I built this up from nothing. It was a bankrupt company. So,
yeah.
And it's the truth. But that being said, let's talk about this fight. You know, interim champion, 5 months after, was it even 5 months? March, April, May, June, July, August, you know, 5 months.
Yeah.
Yeah. So 5 months after Francis wins the title. I guess there was some sort of a contract dispute, or from what I understand, his manager really messed things up, tried to renegotiate a contract or a deal on this fight specifically when they already had a deal. So Dana White did the kingpin move and say, all right, well, we'll just do a fight without you, and we'll put an interim title up. And then what else that also does is really screws Jon Jones over here, because that just pushes his even thought of an opportunity for the title way down the line.
Well, you know who gets screwed over even more by that is the greatest heavyweight champion of all time, Stipe Miocic.
Oh yeah,
Where's he going to fall in line on this?
I think he's still asleep.
You think?
I think he's still sleeping from that knockout.
I don't know, dude. He might be awake by this point, and I'm sure he's pretty freaking angry about.
I mean, I could imagine. I saw they were talking about him potentially fighting with Jon Jones, and I think that would be a great fight. I think they could even pay-per-view that fight.
I think it's excellent fight.
Yeah, but
for the interim heavyweight.
Yeah, the double interim. You have 3 champions, and now we're getting real WBA.
Actually, you just get a ring for this one. You don't even get a belt.
Yeah, definitely. You get a medal.
Yeah, exactly.
Or you get one of those trophies from Little League.
Yep.
That's what it is.
Yep.
But yeah, as far as the fight goes, what'd you think?
So I saw the Vegas odds. I believe it had Cyril Gane as a favorite. It looked like he was a pretty solid favorite too. I want to say it was like a 2-1. Man, the way that he looked this past fight, it's a different fighter than what Derek Lewis was. Francis is right. Francis is much more aggressive than Derek was in this past fight. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure. It almost looked like it was Derek back when he had the back problems.
Yeah.
He just looked stiff as a board and wasn't moving around and just could never find his rhythm. That's not going to be who Francis is in this fight. I think Francis is more of the kill or be killed type mentality where and we haven't seen him get knocked out. So, it's hard to say that he's just going to get pieced up by Cyril Gane, but the well-roundedness of Cyril Gane is quite similar to a Stipe. He's good at everything, and I think that Cyril Gane has a really good chance of beating Francis Ngannou in this fight. However, we saw how much Francis Ngannou has evolved in his game from UFC 220. I believe it was when I was in Boston seeing Stipe versus Ngannou versus the last fight where he just obviously demolished Stipe. Yeah. So if he continues to evolve like he has in the past couple of years, then I think that there's a chance that he beats Cyril Gane. But I'm a believer in Cyril Gane. I think that he becomes the next heavyweight champion, undisputed heavyweight champion of the world, unified, undisputed. Every other word that you want to use to be the guy, he's going to be that, I believe.
Wow.
Craziness. I know.
I don't know. I mean, honestly, he really could. He's got the skill set, and they're very familiar with each other, being former training partners. But that, with that being said, it's like you can be so familiar, but I'm sure there was no way Francis was going 100%, or else he would have killed people in the gym, because Francis is just that guy. He's like, especially now that he's a little more well-rounded, he's like if Deontay Wilder could actually box a little bit.
Yeah. That's actually a really good comparison. Yeah.
Yeah. So now he could just put the lights out so quickly. And how sharp he was with that little check hook that knocked out Stipe. And I don't know, man, it's hard to see him getting beat, but,
we've seen him get beat before, and Stipe wasn't able to. Stipe, if you look at Curtis Blades, you look at these guys who can wrestle, they haven't been able to get a hold of them. They haven't been able to close the distance and get into that grappling range. So it comes down to that, really. If Cyril Gane can get into that grappling range, and he was out muscling Derek Lewis on the cage. It looked like a man holding down a little boy against the cage. Really, he was having his day with him. And if Cyril Gane can be half as effective against Francis as he was against Derek Lewis on the cage, I think that Francis is in big trouble. But again, it's closing the distance and making sure you're not within that nuclear zone.
Yeah, and Francis has one of those weird ways. It's like the second you realize like you're a little too close and you try to back up, Francis will just like storm you with some craziness. So there's really no getting away from it sometimes. But I guess we'll see what happens. We do have an interim champion now, regardless if we agree with it or not. I think one last thing I'll mention is, do you think that Derek maybe, I don't want to say like, folded to like the pressure of the situation, but he had more pressure on his back, considering the whole arena was cheering his name, and really his game was to kind of sit back and wait for that shot. And then Cyril didn't really have to do anything, So
He his leg.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, he got to just sit back. He didn't have that pressure of like, okay, I have to make this fight. I can just play my game plan because either way they're going to boo me. So let me just sit back. I'll play my game plan. Derek, it was almost like they're cheering your name and you're not even throwing a shot for the whole round. Like, hey, do something here. Do you think that had anything to play with it, or he just got murked?
I think that he did just get murked. Let's not forget that Cyril Gane was not even supposed to be in this position in the first place. This was supposed to be Francis Ngannou versus Derek Lewis.
Mm-hmm.
So, him just being here is enough. It's a win by itself, right?
Yeah.
Then you're in your opponent's territory. Actually, I think he was a favorite in the fight, wasn't he, Cyril Gane?
I don't even remember.
I think he was a Vegas favorite. So, maybe that kind of equalizes that out a little bit, the expectations for Vegas, which is traditionally pretty accurate. Obviously not all the time, but for the most part, they seem to get it right.
Yeah. By a reasonable degree.
By a reasonable degree, yeah. And I think, this was who was it talking about this? I want to say it was Daniel Cormier talking about just having to figure out tickets for your family members when you're fighting in your city causes so much stress in what's already, of course you could pawn that off onto somebody else, but you still have people hitting you up, this and that. And I think I remember I saw Derek Lewis either the week before, a couple weeks before on camera. He was like, guys, I ain't got no more tickets left. Like, don't hit me up. Like, don't call me. None of this. Like, there's no more tickets.
Yeah.
So you hate to think that anything other than one man being better than another man is what caused the outcome to happen. But it's hard to say that the pressure maybe kind of weighed itself down on Derek Lewis and it caused him to, not be himself. And we also know what injury issues he was having as well. Like, I don't know. I haven't looked at, but I don't know if he's spoken since the fight. I don't know if he's posted on Instagram or anything like that. Maybe if he's been on Helwan.
I haven't seen nothing. No.
Yeah, so I haven't heard anything from him, and I would have to expect that he was healthy going into the fight. So if he was, then it seems like it was the pressure.
Yeah, and that's a good point you bring up about the ticket sales and stuff. I mean, I've seen that firsthand, and I fought at like Guilt nightclub. You know what I mean? So I could only imagine if you're like filling up an arena in your hometown when you're fighting for like the championship, how much more pressure that is. Like literally everybody coming out of the woodwork hitting you up for tickets. And
how pumped were you on that walkout when we were screaming your name, dude? Did you feel like you were almost going to pass out from the adrenaline?
No, I was pretty chill. Once it's like you walk out there, it's like, okay, this is happening. And then you get in there and it's like, all right, this is going to happen, I guess. I didn't really wake up until I got punched in the face for the first time. It was like I got hit and I specifically remember like us like clinching up afterwards. And as the ref was like breaking us, I look over, I see TJ's face and he's like, and I was like, damn, I got to wake up. And then after that, I don't really think there was like really a moment that I was like losing at all.
Right.
But at the very beginning, I was like, boom. And I was like, all right, I guess this is happening now. But yeah, it was definitely.
I was kind of drunk, to be honest with you.
Yeah, so. Me too. But all right, that being said, we got a new interim champion. I guess we'll look and see when this undisputed fight's happening. Hopefully sooner rather than later. It seems like Cyril's healthy. Francis is healthy. He said he's good to go. He could have fought that night. So I would like to see them run this in like, December, like latest.
Yeah, I think they just announced 267 was going to be in Abu Dhabi. Was there a card scheduled for 267 already?
267, is that the October card?
That's October. That's October 30th. Yeah. Oh,
Okay.
that's Jan versus Glover Teixeira. All right. Can we put
And
something
then
else?
Jan versus Aldo or Aljo.
That's right. Okay. Yeah. So you already have two title fights on there.
And then I think they might have moved Amanda Nunes over there, unless they
I
moved
bet
it to
they'll
December.
move Amanda Nunes over there. Yeah. So probably
So that's
the card after that.
That's solid. I'm cool with that. I'm okay with that.
I am just befuddled by Glover Teixeira fighting for a belt, but
yeah,
it is what it is. And we actually, let's not forget about 266. I'm sure we'll do a video for that once that comes around. That's not until late September, but we have two title fights, and we have the great Nick Diaz versus the legend
Robbie Lawler too. The rematch we've all been waiting for.
So I'm sure we'll be doing another live video for that as well.
Absolutely. All right, bro. Well, this has been fun. Until next time.
Until next time. Thank you, sir. Bye, everybody.
Absolutely. Bye.